Welcome to Deciphering the Color Wheel. My name is Andrea Slusarski. You may have already watched my video on the science of color. Join me as I discuss ways to see and use the color wheel in your classroom in this video. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. So remember Isaac Newton splitting white light into the visible spectrum, figuring out some foundational color discoveries? No biggie, right? Well, Newton also gave us our first color wheel. Basically, what he did was he joined the ends of the spectrum, red and violet, to create an asymmetrical wheel to express the progression of colors. He also included music notes on his color wheel, and for some reason, I haven't found a solid answer to this, but it's still neat to think about. Now we're going to jump forward some time and look at Goethe, who introduced us to his symmetrical color wheel. This was based off his theory of colors. He wanted the color wheel to represent the complementary colors to be directly across from each other. Where Newton was offering us a more scientific-based color wheel around the visible spectrum, Goethe tried to explain more the phenomena and feeling of color. So enough of these guys already, let's get back to the color wheel itself. The definition of the color wheel states that it is a visual representation of colors arranged according to their chromatic relationships. I want to clarify here that I'm going to be addressing the color wheel talk about subtractive colors. Since I'm providing examples for physical painting, using the color wheel that painters refer to only makes sense. In my classroom, I look at these different ways of the color wheels, but they're more discussion-based with my students. I do not require or teach the different color wheels because I'm already making color pretty complex. I don't feel the need to make it even more. So we're going to see two types of color wheels, subtractive and additive. There's also various color models within these color wheels. So we're just going to quick break them down so we can understand them more in case any of your students are curious. I'm going to start with the one we're most familiar with, and that is the red, yellow, blue, RYB set of subtractive primary colors used for mixing pigments. This is what we use in art education and painting and helps best explain color mixing when relation to acrylic or tempera paint. Another term you may hear or see in subtractive color mixing is CMYK or CMY. This is the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, or just cyan, magenta, yellow. This is found in color printing. And because of what I like to describe to my students as color magic, combinations of different amounts of these colors can create a wide range of colors when printed. Now, additive colors differ from subtractive colors because they require mixing different light colors. So here's where it gets tricky. Because color is light, what does this even mean? The most common examples of additive color are television screens and that computer you're looking at right now. Your primary colors used in the additive color system are red, green, and blue. Additive color is a result of the way your eye detects color, and it's not a property of light. It is instead producing a light that your eyes are viewing and seeing as a color. However, it can't paint things together like we would physically when mixing different paint values. It needs to combine various formulas of red, green, and blue white waves to create the same wavelength of the light that's bouncing off the color object. So it's pretty much tricking your eyes. So wow, this is usually the part where my students stare at me and they're confused beyond belief. So let's stick with our favorite, the red, yellow, blue subtractive color wheel. So what is the purpose does the color wheel have? Why do we even need the color wheel? Well, just like in math, history, or science classes, diagrams are used to explain and make sense of a large source of information. One of my favorite examples is from a science class, and that is the water cycle. Science teachers use this diagram to help show how evaporation, transpiration, precipitation, etc. are all connected. This is what the color wheel is, a diagram. It is a visual representation for all of the relationships and color mixing needed to know in painting. So just like this diagram is used in science, it's meant to give us information to then use. So here's where I tell you, stop making the color wheel a project and start making the color wheel a tool. When I start off with beginning painters, I do not have them create me a color wheel. Instead, we use this tool to begin our learning of color mixing. The first step in deciphering the color wheel is looking at why the colors are organized this way. Start referring to your colors now as hues, or the pure color. You start with your primary hues, red, yellow, and blue. Next come the secondary hues, green, orange, and violet. On the color wheel, these are located in between the two, get it, secondary, primary colors used to mix and create them. Finally, the intermediate colors, or tertiary colors, are created and placed in between the primary hue and secondary hue that creates them, like yellow-green. I always make the joke that the primary hues are the boss colors, which is why their name comes first in the naming of the intermediate hues. Plus, saying green-yellow just sounds pretty wrong. The next part of color mixing I introduce is value. This is the lightness or darkness of a hue. So either adding white to create a tint, or black, even though it's my least favorite color to mix, but for here I'll get over it, to create a shade of a color, or even gray to make the tone. Now I asked my students to create a 5-step value scale from light to dark. Here's an example of the color mixing guide I have students complete as an exercise to see mixing primary hues and creating values found on each color wheel. Lastly, the subject of chroma needs to be described in the beginnings of color mixing. Chroma refers to the intensity of a color being created. This, I feel, is the hardest part describing to students about color. Before painting, they might have already described something as just red. However, there's so many intensities of the color red. Are you wanting to make a stop sign red or a dirt red? Both have a very different chroma while still falling into the red hue category. Now, when we remove the color wheel from being a project, you're going to open up your classroom to dive much deeper into color mixing. By using the color wheel as their guide and diagram, your students can expand their knowledge of hue, value, and chroma in color mixing much further than challenging themselves to come up with a creative way to represent the color wheel. I am much more interested in various exercises for my students to understand the color wheel, as opposed to larger time-consuming projects just simply showing the color wheel at the beginning of my painting units. Now, the color wheel holds even more information than just mixing the colors. Hailing back to Goethe, the color wheel is also useful in understanding the psychology of colors and their relationships with each other. He wrote how yellow hues demand the color violet and passionately discussed the connections these colors across the color wheel had with each other. Another one of my favorite quotes seen here comes from the artist Chagall in saying that all colors are the friends of their neighbors and the lovers of their opposites. Clearly, we not only see colors, but we also bring them to life as artists. So when I'm teaching color theory, I focus on the emotion the relationship a color holds with another. Now, complementary colors are your colors located directly across from each other on the color wheel. I'm also quick to discuss analogous colors, and the term for these means that they are 3 or 4 colors located right next to each other on the color wheel. Just like Chagall said earlier, analogous colors, any 3 of these colors, are friends. They like to hang out on the color wheel. As a fun bonus feature, I like to challenge any higher performing students with the terms triad and split complementary. These terms are included in the list of vocab included in this painting course. Now, here's where I leave you with a complete rant on the color wheel. I want us to ask ourselves, though, why is the color wheel so important? What is the difference if I make it a project or if I teach it as a diagram? Well, these are all great questions because I oftentimes have students ask me why we're doing so many exercises or what the big deal about the color wheel is anyway. My answer to these questions to my students is that I want to broaden their knowledge of color. As an artist, I know my ability to mix and see colors has taken me years to achieve. I'm no longer referring back to my color wheel to know that putting orange in some blue paint is a good complementary move. So for my students, I'm just trying to jumpstart that process. Use the color wheel as your tool, understand the color placements and where different friends or lovers of colors are found, and your paintings are going to shine. Thank you for joining in on Deciphering the Color Wheel. Until next time, thank you.